by silencing Canadians online with Bill C-10. Will the Prime Minister tell us how long it will be before every aspect of Canadian life must conform to his Liberal vision of Canadian society?
The tinfoil hats on the other side of the aisle are really quite spectacular.
So it turns out that trying to regulate the internet is not quite as easy as a task as the Trudeau Liberals thought about. I'm, of course, referring to Bill C-10. Every time the Minister of Heritage, Stephen Guilbeault, goes out to the media to try to justify it or rationalize it, it's becoming painfully obvious that the minister himself may not have actually read the legislation that he is trying to cram through. Let's go back just a little bit. Over the past few weeks, there has been a growing chorus of opposition to the Liberals' attempt to regulate the internet. Now, usually we do this as putting questions to Prime Minister Trudeau, but we know at this point we're never going to get answers. So I'm going to attempt to answer my own questions when it comes to Bill C-10. So let's look at some of the myths and facts. Is this legislation actually constitutional? Could it stand up to a charter challenge? Well, recently, the Trudeau Liberals have gone forward and said, we are going to put this through a constitutional threshold, a test, which is normally what happens with most legislation. So currently, Bill C-10 in its current form is quote unquote on pause. But as Warren Kinsella, Sun Media columnist, recently wrote, there are so many charter violations, not the least of which is Section 2B. You can go read that for yourself. I don't want to get into the weeds about it, but it's ostensibly a fundamental violation of the charter as the bill is written in its current form. But that doesn't mean that the bill is dead necessarily, because the government can come back and say that we need to reasonably quash or squelch some of your ability to have free speech. So we believe that it will be a charter violation, but doesn't necessarily mean it's off the table. The Prime Minister was recently asked about those that oppose Bill C-10. Well, he referred to the opposition as the tinfoil hat crew. Well, last time I checked, mine didn't fit very well, nor did the multiple academics, the former heads of the CRTC, multiple individuals who have come out in opposition from the left, from the right, from the center. This takes no political lines. We can see that the Trudeau government's attempt to try to regulate the internet harms everyone. One of the things that they'd like us to believe is that this legislation is there to protect minority communities. Well, we could argue that it does quite the opposite. Many of those in racialized communities who use these social media platforms to express themselves, to communicate with one another, they don't have much of a voice already. Those like the Toronto Sun Twitter account, for example, or even my own personal one, or those that are out there in the media world that have thousands upon thousands of followers, they can already amplify their voice. They already have a chance that if the government tried to shut us down, others would speak out for us. So this legislation does nothing to help those in racialized communities. So who is C-10 really trying to protect? Is it really just about the Liberal government not wanting to have quote unquote speech out there that they disagree with, including this video? Or is it about ensuring that Canadian content flourishes? Who is this helping? Is it the lobby for the Canadian Media Fund? Is it helping legacy media in terms of the large telecom companies in this country? We certainly know that the internet has thwarted all sorts of industries. We've all been Ubered in a way. But what is to say that the big companies that are social media platforms just won't operate in Canada? They could just turn off. They don't need to go through the rigmarole of the CRTC regulation, and not the least of which to say, how are they going to police this in the first place? You can only imagine the army of staff that the government would have to hire in order to monitor every single one of our keystrokes. I said earlier, of course, that every time Minister Guilbeault speaks about this issue, he causes more confusion. There's no clarity. So you do have to wonder, again, has the minister read the bill in its entirety? Has he read to the very end where there is going to be some suggestion that YouTube stars in Canada, for example, that make money off of their platform, that they are going to be now subject as broadcasters? None of this has been made clear. And so one has to go back and say to the Liberals, revisit this, rethink this, start from scratch. No one's going to argue that current legislation within the broadcast standards is grossly outdated within the context of the internet and in this day and age. But no one is asking for freedom of speech to be stifled. No one is asking for the government to regulate us. This is where the Trudeau Liberals have failed in their calculus that Canadians will idly sit by and allow this to happen. Sun Media columnist Lauren Gunter recently wrote that the Chinese government employs nearly 2 million people to monitor the keystrokes of the people of China, and they've banned hundreds of thousands of websites. So in Canada, saying that we're not as bad as China just isn't good enough. Log on to Facebook and Twitter. Let us know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.